Well, good evening and welcome back to Sunday Evening Devotions and our journey through the Bible. Tonight's story is an exciting story. It's a story of the War of Kings and the rescue at night and of a strange personage that appears in Scripture. So let's begin tonight our story looking at Genesis 14. So as we remember, we had left Lot, who had taken his possessions, his herds and all, and had moved to the valley of Siddim, or the Jordan Valley. And he had moved close to the city of Sodom in that great valley. He wanted to be near the Canaanites, and he wanted to be near the hustle and bustle of cities. And so he had tied his future with the future of those places. Well, the two kings of Sodom and Gomorrah had aligned themselves with three other kings, and they had decided to quit paying tribute, that is, tax money, to another king, Kedorlaomer, who was from Elam. Well, Kedorlaomer didn't like this prospect at all in losing the tribute, the tax money from these kings, and he saw that certainly as a threat to his power in the area. And so he gathered four kings, and they came from what we would call today modern-day Iraq. And he went first westward and then southward into the land to reclaim those territories for his own and to punish those kings for their rebellion. So he came with his mighty armies, his four kings with him, and they defeated the five kings of the valley of Siddim. Now I'm sure that the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah figured they had five kings and the armies that they would prevail, but they did not. And so Lot and all that he possessed and all the people of the cities were taken captive, and Kedorlaomer took them northward back to Elam as prisoners. Well, one of the people that survived the battle came and told Abram what had happened. Remember, Abram had stayed in the high country, and so he was unaware of what had happened. And so he gathered his men, and he talked to three of his compatriots, or friends of the Canaanites, and they gathered their men, and they went off to rescue Lot and all the people of Sodom and Gomorrah in the valley. So they came upon Kedorlaomer his army at night. And when they were least suspecting it and partying, they came upon them and overthrew them and chased them far north, rescuing Lot and all that he had and all the people of the valley. And so Abram and the three men with him, the Canaanites, brought back all the people and all the possessions back to the valley of Siddim, to the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah in the various places. Well, on their way back, we find that Abram then meets this very strange personage. He only appears three times in Scripture, and this is the first place. He appears again in Psalm 110 and later in Hebrews. This is Melchizedek. Now, this is a very interesting person. Melchizedek, that name means King of Righteousness. That was his name. But he was the king of Salem, which is the old name for the king of Jerusalem, or the city of peace. And so he was the king of peace. And we're told that he was the priest of the Most High, the high God, the true God, the God of Abram. And Abram recognized that. And so as he came out to meet Abram, bringing back all the people and the spoils from the war, the king of Salem, Melchizedek, this high priest, gave to Abram and had all his men and everything, wine and bread to refresh them. Abram, recognizing this person as a messenger of God, then gave to him a tenth. Now what we find is interesting because Jesus Christ, who will be descended from Abraham, becomes a high priest not according to Aaron, who was still to be born yet, but of Melchizedek, this strange person, this one whom God had kept as a witness of the true religion and the belief in God, even in the land of Canaan. And so we find that there's a connection again as God reveals the promise and to Abram that he might trust in what God would provide. Well, that fortified Abram, because when he comes back and he meets the king of Sodom says, "Give me the people and take all the stuff. It's all yours. You can have whatever you want." Abraham says, "No, let my friends, the Canaanites, get their portion. But me, I won't be enriched by any man here." Abram stayed away from the temptation that Lot had given into. He wouldn't be enriched by the world. No, he was going to be enriched by the promises of God only and stay separate. He knew that that was the safe place to be. That was where the real wealth was. It was the wealth in the promise that God had given him. It would be an affront to his friends, but Abraham was willing to be identified with God alone, and even to insult the world, to remain separate for God's sake and for God's purposes. And so we have Abram trusting in the riches and the promises of God. Well, that's good news. Good night.